what can we find out from all of this history, right, that is relevant to us today, right? And there are some things that I want to go through here that I think are very relevant to our daily lives today, and things that I've told you time and time again, but they are lessons that we can learn from the Great Depression. Number one, save for emergencies. Okay, we know the importance of saving for emergencies and having money set aside in case bad things happen. Now, coming on the heels of the Roaring '20s, a period of widespread prosperity following World War I, the Great Depression sent a shockwave through the country that most Americans were completely unprepared for. People who didn't have enough savings stashed away ended up broke, unemployed, and saddled with debt. So having emergency savings could have helped them there, and it can help you when you need it. Coronavirus hits, you lose your job, emergency savings can help you in that place. Okay. Then, second lesson that I think the Great Depression teaches us is you have to learn to do some things for yourself. Okay, during the Great Depression, DIY became the guiding principle. If you wanted something but couldn't afford to buy it, the best option was to make it yourself. Some people made everything from clothes to cleaning supplies at home. They even whipped up toys like corn husk dolls to keep your kids busy. If you're looking to save a bit of money during the pandemic, right, so that's where we are now, or just looking to avoid going to the store, you can find a ton of free tutorials online that will show you how to make all sorts of household things, right? And you can do a lot of things now via YouTube or any number of influencers that want to teach you how to do things on your own. And I'm trying to teach you how to do DIY finance, right? But people trying to teach you how to build things and how to maintain your home well, or build things for your kids, whatever it may be, right? DIY can really help you, and it can help you to save money and be prepared in a time of economic collapse and societal collapse where you can actually do things for yourself. The third thing I think we can take away from the Great Depression is that you should take steps to avoid debt, right? And this really falls at all times in all situations, but especially in these big financial crashes, right? The leverage is something that can just rocket things in a downward way, right? And that's not what we want. We want, to be out of debt. And if everything was working on cash, right, then it wouldn't accelerate growth, but it also wouldn't accelerate losses either, right? Because when it comes to debt, let's say for companies, right? If a company has debt and things are going badly and they can't pay their debts, well, not only are they hurting themselves, but they're also hurting the debt holders, right? They're also hurting those who hold their debt and are expecting payment, right? So it just magnifies and really makes larger the impact of these crashes. So take steps to avoid debt, and it'll help you in your financial life. Something else that we can learn from the Great Depression is to eat at home, right? Really save on your costs of eating out and going out and doing things that are unnecessary that you do not have to spend money on. For the majority of Americans in the 1930s, dining out was off the table, right? Practically every meal was cooked from scratch at home, and recipes of the day were creative, to say the least. Okay, while you might not be quite that desperate, making your meals at home and actually using up the food you've got in your pantry remains a sensible way to save money and can help you in times where things are really tight. Okay, then the fifth thing I think we can learn from the Great Depression is you can't be afraid to relocate. Okay, don't be afraid to move to somewhere where the opportunities are better. I think a lot of people get stuck in ruts. They get stuck in places where things are just so bad. And I know some people don't have the opportunity to relocate, but if you can, right, and if you do have better opportunities elsewhere and things are bad, then take advantage of the ability to relocate and go and follow dreams and do things that you expect will have the biggest payoff for you financially over the long term. Okay, then the sixth thing I think we can learn from the Great Depression is that you need life insurance to protect your family. Okay, being a parent can be stressful at the best of times, but the Great Depression was a new low. Not only was it hard to provide adequate food and shelter, but if something happened to you, your children would be left out in the cold without a dollar to their name. One of the saving graces for families during the Depression was life insurance, which provided liquidity during a time when even the banks couldn't. Cash value policies helped many families, and I tell you guys all the time that I'm not a big fan of cash value, that term life insurance is the best thing that we've got going today, right? But it can help you to protect your family, and it can help to protect your family if things are bad or if things are good or whatever. If something happens to you and they rely on your income, then they can still take care of themselves. The seventh thing I think that we can take from the Great Depression is that you need to learn to live within your means. And this was a huge thing coming out of the Great Depression that I think anybody who's got grandparents or great grandparents or even parents who were quote unquote depression babies, they have this willingness to keep things for longer than they need to keep them, or maybe be a little hoarder-ish, right? Have a little hoarder about them to where they keep things they don't have to keep, and they use things they don't have to use for longer than they need to, right? And they really try to pinch pennies because they want to live within their means, right? Many Americans saw the economic growth of the Roaring '20s as an excuse to live outside their means. Okay, they purchased big ticket items that they really couldn't afford on installment plans, and they went into debt for things, right? Which was a strain on their cash flow then, and it's still a strain on your cash flow today if you're taking out debt, right? And they were not living within their means. That can really help you to do. I mean, I think if you just simplified finance, personal finance down, and you said, what's the one tip that you could give somebody to say, if you do this, you'll be financially successful. Maybe not perfect, right? But you will be financially successful. And it is live below your means, because if you live on less than you make, then you will always have some left, which is a great thing, right? Another thing I think we can learn from the Great Depression is that odd jobs are better than no jobs, right? A lot of people took on odd jobs because there wasn't a lot of work out there to do, right? And you see people do that today. People take on jobs being Uber drivers, and they do stuff online, and they build new small businesses, new side hustles, right? The side hustle came about, but the side hustle isn't new, right? Odd jobs have always been around, but they're just around now in a different way than they ever have been, and they're more available to us than they ever have been, and they can help us to jumpstart our financial life and keep our financial life afloat if anything negative is going on, okay? Then, another thing that I think can help us to learn from the Great Depression is that if you want to retire, right, and if you plan on having money one day, then it's okay to start small, but you need to start, and you need to start building up money for yourself. You need to start building up the opportunity to retire at the time that you want to, because if something exceedingly negative happens economically, right, don't be at the whim of the economy as to whether or not you can retire, or as to whether or not you can do the things that you want to do. Take your retirement into your own hands, and you'll be able to do so much more than you ever thought you could. And then the last thing that I think can help us, something that we can learn from the Great Depression, is that you need to help those around you. Help those in need. Help your community, because the Great Depression made everybody really rally around one another and ask each other for help and try to get back on your feet the best way that you knew how, right? And if you have the means to help others, then you should help others. If you have the means to do things for others that other people can't, then take that. That is your blessing, right? That is, you've been blessed with the resources or the finances or whatever to do things for other people. Then absolutely do that, and that will be extremely fulfilling to you, and it will help other people to pass along the good deeds and not rely so much on the government or rely on handouts, but rely on their community, building strong groups of people around one another that can help each other, pick each other up when they're down, and encourage each other towards meeting their full potential. I think that is a huge thing when it comes to what we can learn from the Great Depression. So that's the Great Depression, right? The Great Depression, it was a very sour time in the United States, and we still reference it to this day 100 years later, and there is no surprise as to why. But we need to learn from it. We don't need to just sit around and read these types of things in history books or listen to me drone on about it in a podcast for 30 minutes and go, yeah, so what, right? Take something from this. That's why I tried to leave you with some lessons that you can learn from something like the Great Depression. Understand where it came from. Understand, how things today aren't way different than they were way back then, right? Even though life looks different, but the way that things were governed and the issues that we had economically aren't extremely different. And so we should really take things to heart and do the things we can to put ourselves in the best situation possible if something negative were to occur, or just in our everyday lives, what can we learn from something negative occurring? Because you can always learn from tragic events like the Great Depression.